Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Michael Pastor, thank you for joining Lawyers Who Learn. I'm really excited to talk to you not only about your career, but the really cool things you're doing at New York Law School.
David, thank you for having me. It is great to be with you.
As you know, I think you know, we were talking about it a little bit before we started. I am a graduate of New York Law School. My dad went to New York Law School. Maybe that helped me get in when I was applying. Probably did, because I was a good student, but I could have done better in, the what is it called for law? It's not the LSATs, yeah.
The LSAT, yep.
So, but I really enjoyed my time in learning and doing all the things that, not necessarily the case law stuff, but like the business side. And that's why I'm super excited to learn more about what you're doing right now at New York Law School. And from my research that I did before this podcast, from what I understand, you came on board at 2021.
That's right.
You and Dean Anthony Crowell worked together at the governor's office. I mean, the mayor's office. You sounds like you did a lot of cool things there. We're going to go back and forth to your career because you've had a really storied career. But he brought you on in 2021 when, let me see if I can do it. James Tricarico? No, I messed it up.
Tricarico, so close.
Gave an endowment to the school to start an institute. And the institute looks like it's focused on both the route of going to in-house counsel and then the route of understanding the business side. Like you have a mini-MBA, you have other things like that I love. And so let's start at the institute and then we'll work backwards to your career if that's okay.
Sounds great.
So just take us to the conversation before you're working at New York Law School. Dean Crowell calls you up. I need you on a board. Like, was it like that? I got this endowment. You're the guy for it. Like, tell us what's happening there.
So I guess basically at the time that I came on board, I had left the city. I was working with the city for almost 15 years in a variety of different roles. And that culminated in becoming, I had sort of three hats at the very end of my career. I was General Counsel of the City Department of Information, Technology, and Telecommunications. I was the first General Counsel of the New York City Cyber Command, which was created under Mayor de Blasio. And I was the Deputy Commissioner for Franchises, overseeing our portfolio with telecommunications providers. And so that was a really cool stint in that I had those three jobs, overseeing a team of about 45 people, and just getting to serve as the lead technology and telecom lawyer, for the city of New York, was just fantastic. And in that time, I was the General Counsel. I was the lead lawyer for those organizations. I had also been teaching as an adjunct at Brooklyn Law School, and before that at Columbia Law School. And I'd always enjoyed teaching. Teaching was from the get-go had been just something I really, really enjoyed. But I was doing it on the side. So when I left the city, I was teaching then, and the dean did call me, about this opportunity, and ended up bringing me on board. And what I will say about the institute, and I'll share some more details about it, but what's been really fun about it is that when Mr. Tricarico helped to found this institute with the dean, the details were sparse. It was like, we think this is a good idea. We think this is a need. And Jim Tricarico is just a wonderful, person. He's an alum of New York Law School. He's on the board of trustees, and he's the former general counsel of Edward Jones, and just a wonderful guy and an extremely talented former lead lawyer. But as I said, when I started, they really sort of handed it to me and said, okay, you go. You're former general counsel. You've got this former general counsel that endowed this. You go, you build it up. And, we're coming into our 4th year of existence now, and we just got to build it up from scratch, and it's become a real thing. And that's been really fun.
And I got this correct. You came on specifically to head this institute, right?
That's right. Yeah. So
that's a little bit of a career risk in a way. So, yep. First, I'm super curious, like what your background is in IT, but like, what was to take that career transition? So by the way, just to take a step back, this is called Lawyers Who Learn, because the goal and the hope is other lawyers, either who are in career transitions or who are looking to get involved in in-house counsel, or law students who are wanting to go that route, can learn from your experiences, and you can share what you've learned. So just to give you, that's the hope and goal of this. And so like leaving the city to go to work at a law school is a big step that is not clearly defined.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll first say I love the name of this podcast, because I happen to be, a person who does think of himself as a lifelong learner, and I do approach my career with humility, in that sense of I know a lot. I joke with my students now. Yeah, I know a lot. I've been doing this for 20 years. You know a lot. You know a lot of people, but there's still so much more to learn, on any given day. So I love the topic, and I love the thought of people listening to this thinking to themselves, what more can I learn? What I would say about the move to New York Law School, and by the way, I have a personal connection to the law school, which I'll just mention in passing. My mother, who passed away many, many years ago, who was very dear to me, was a New York Law School alum. Early in my life, she decided to go get a law degree in the evening division, and she graduated in 1984. I distinctly remember her, driving her Datsun 280ZX from Long Island to New York Law School, to study, and bringing those huge, textbooks home, and I think in the building that I currently work, this would have been where she was studying. So anyway, so there was that underlying affection for the school. But on the question of risk, I advise students, and I believe this fully, that the number one most important thing about any job is the people you're working for and the people you're working with. And if you have faith in the people you're working for, people you're working with, then actually the risk is not that big. Dean Crowell has been a mentor of mine for over 2 decades. I spoke to him before taking my first job at the law department. And he's just a wonderful leader of people. He's someone who really cultivates the people that work for him. And we should talk a little bit about leadership, because I feel like lawyers don't really ever get trained in leadership, and either you kind of end up as a good leader, and I know you're a leader. So the last thing I'll say, though, is when it comes to risk, you also need luck. And what's been my luck? Well, my luck here is that Jim Tricarico, the person who founded this institute, is someone who I just hit it off with from the minute that we first spoke. And so, and I'll never forget that. We did that on Zoom. We were still a little stuck in the Zoom era when I had my chat with him. And he's just been so fantastic from the get-go in terms of, Jim, I think we should do this. Good, go do it. Jim, I think I want to bring on a summer fellow, and this is what it looked like. Great, go do it. Michael, I want to introduce you to so-and-so in my network. I think they could help, So yes, it was a risk in that I've never been in academia full-time before in my entire career. But the risk was mitigated by the people.
You mentioned, leadership. And it just so happens that Lawline is about to launch an emerging leaders program.
Great.
And what's so interesting about the way we're doing it, which you can relate to how you're running the Institute, we're launching the emerging leaders program, not necessarily just for lawyers or law firms, and actually not. It applies to them as much as it applies to everyone else. But over the past 20 years, right? I've been doing this a couple of years too. We actually have an emerging leaders program in our own organization that we've built from all the best books, the best coaches, and we have such a great program, and we know so much, and we have so much experience with the 8 million courses that have been taught on Lawline that the whole reason the podcast was started originally was 98% of learning happens outside of CLE, right? And then in addition, learning can only take you so far. You need some sort of coaching, mentoring. Like you said, Dean Crowell is your mentor to get you there, or some sort of formal program. And that's what we're really hoping this emerging leaders program will do, is will help not just lawyers and legal professionals, but for business professionals, because that is what drives us. And there's not enough of that that's out there. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, kudos to you. There's a definite need there. I think that people want to be leaders. We often don't talk about that with, junior lawyers who say, what do you want to do? It's like, I want to litigate. I want to be transactional. I want to do this. And then we frequently skip the question, do you want to lead anything someday?
Is there a leadership program at New York Law School?
I'm not aware of a specific named program like that, although I could easily not know
Yeah,
about it. But there's tons of different, leadership teaching that goes on in
got
many
it.
different respects.
Great. And just to go backwards for a second, what is your background in IT and cybersecurity? Your background there to even get in these
Great.
areas.
So this tees up another question about career risk, right? So I had been at the New York City Law Department for about a decade. I was an advisor to Mayor Bloomberg's team and agencies, and then I was an appellate litigator for 5 years. I was litigating in the state appellate court, which was a great job. But I knew I wanted to be a GC, and I wanted to be a GC in city government. And I got a call from another mentor who said that Do It, which is now the Mayor's Office of Technology Innovation, is looking for a general counsel. Would you be interested? And I didn't even think it through. I was like, yep, let me go meet. And I met with Ann Roast, Commissioner Ann Roast, who's another mentor of mine. She was the city CIO and her first deputy. And we met. We had a great interview. And they said, what's your background in IT? And, teach people to be honest in interviews. I said, using technology. That's my only background in IT. Again, definitely interested in technology, but I had not worked in that.
What year is this?
What is that?
What year are we talking about?
This was 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, 27. Well, the interview was 2016. I started in 2017, and so I went in, and that first day, I sit down and I got the transition memo, and I'm meeting with my team, and what are we dealing with? And that was day one for me as a technology lawyer. And now, after having done that, for nearly 4 years and being so steeped in the technology work of the city of New York, it's become a passion. Yeah, isn't that funny? So,
wow, did not expect that answer.
Yeah.
So, also you were also on the Council for Cybersecurity. Was that during the same time?
that was after.
So, what did you have besides learning on the job? And maybe that's the only thing.
Yeah.
Was there any sort of formal training you needed to do to better understand what the hell IT is?
So there wasn't formal training in a way, because what was required of me was something I was very much, an expert in, right? The lawyering part. Right? So advising on contracts, advising on legislation and regulatory oversight, labor and employment law issues, oversight by the city council and engaging on that, procurement, which is a very complicated thing in the city. All those things I was ready for. What I was not ready for was what the client was doing. I mean, that was the part I needed to learn. And I'll tell you a story. There's a wonderful individual named Dan Nunez, who's now he runs the security shop at NICER's pension shop. And one day we were talking about endpoint security protection that he wanted to get. And I said, Dan, I need to understand, how this works. Can we do like a little session? So he came over to my office. I had a whiteboard at the time. I should get one here actually. And he took out a marker and he started whiteboarding like what endpoint security looks like, right? Which I had never heard the word endpoint security in my life really before.
Yeah.
And it was just so illuminating. It's like, oh, those are the endpoints. Those are the risk points. Like how that flows in and how an attacker can get in through one endpoint and then move about the system, So that's the kind of learning I did.
Well, just what's so interesting about where we are today, I've been doing something which is super cool, I think. I've been having an hour a day, sometimes less, for the past week or two. I've been testing it out, talking to ChatGPT Advanced on any topic that I want. And what I find that I learned so well about that is it's personalized learning. So I could take it wherever I want. So I'd be curious if I was talking to ChatGPT, asking about endpoint security, going back and forth and just asking those questions. And I went from topic A to topic Z and then back to topic A the same way I'm doing here. And so it's just going to be so interesting how learning will accelerate because you happen to have the right person to speak to. But now, forget about hallucinations for a second, because I know it's still there, but it's less and less. The ability to get these answers much quicker and learn something new at the job. So I love that you had no IT background before you took this. because it gives hope to anybody trying to really transition from A to Z, because you usually get pigeonholed. Your first job, that's what you do for the next 30 years of your career. And that's kind of, it's depressing for some.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was, though, a generalist, and I do think that really, helps. I mean, I was working when I was in legal counsel at the law department, which was from 2006 through 2011. I was advising the mayors and their agencies on any host of things. There was I had to become, I worked on food grading, the ABCs and the windows you see in restaurants. And I worked on that regulation. I worked
still there. It's still there. I still see it everywhere.
Yeah, I worked on juvenile justice issues. I worked on congestion pricing when that was first proposed.
What year was that proposed?
2008. Can you believe it? It's taken that long.
Can you believe it actually happened?
I kind of can, but I'm a supporter. So I think it's great. But yeah, so I think that, we probably will get to sort of the question sort of for the junior attorneys, what advice, do you give? And I think the thing that I often say is, number one, have faith in your ability. Like you are going to be good at this. Have faith in your ability. Stack your knowledge, right? Like once you've learned one thing, that's learned forever, hopefully. Like keep stacking your knowledge. And I'll give you one really example. When you write legislation at the city level, the effective date is an extremely difficult and important part of the bill. Right? Okay. The bill says we're changing the law in the following way. And then at the end, it's the effective date. When does this law take effect? How it interrelates with other laws. And it's a very complex process. And I was really well trained by some amazing municipal lawyers on this. And I feel like it's a skill I apply to this day. Thinking through what this word means as it relates to other words that are relevant here. So yeah, I feel like I learned how to do good.
Can you explain that? I'm a little confused what you mean.
Yeah, well, basically, like, you have to be so precise. You have to think through every word in the effective date, because that law is going on the books. And when it's on the books, it is a law that will apply to an industry or to a group of people. It's going to interact with other laws that are on the books. It may have a grace period. It might have a rollout period. It might have an expiration period. And if so, what happens when it expires? Just all these questions you wouldn't think. But
I mean, one good example is what's happening with congestion pricing right now is all the parking spots north of 61st Street are being filled up in those neighborhoods, or in the 90s, wherever they are, where now nobody who's a resident there can actually park. And now they're trying to think about laws that will be residential permit parking, which they have in other areas. But that's not necessarily connected to the effective date, but there's so many consequences when you make a change of all the other changes that happen. And of course, there's challenges for people who are, blue collar workers who do drive into the city, and that really makes a big difference. And there's obviously $8 or $9 is different than 15, but it's supposed to go up there over the next couple of years. And then, of course, the challenge is there's a lot of arguments that there's a lot of waste at the MTA as a whole. And then I don't know if you've been on the subway lately, but certainly not what looking like it did before the pandemic, in terms of, I feel it, everyone feels it. But that's for a different podcast.
Maybe I was about to go there, but I will leave congestion pricing aside for a different one.
I just
invite me back to talk about that particular topic.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now let's talk about the Institute.
Sure.
So can you take us, just give us an overview of it, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper.
Sure. Sort of two central missions, I'd say. The first is focused on the student body, right? We are here to help prepare students who may want to pursue in-house careers either after law school or later in there. How do we do that? The first thing we did was we created a brand new seminar called the In-House Counsel Experience Seminar, which is a skills and simulation seminar where students come in and role play what it's like to be in-house, what it's like to write an in-house memo, what it's like to speak in-house, what it's like to think like an in-house lawyer. I'm actually teaching it tonight, so it's sort of fresh in mind. The demand for that course has been immense. We now teach it six times a year. It's capped at 16 students. We teach it 6 times a year, and there's a wait list.
Wow. Why do you cap it so low?
Because you need to have a small enough classes so that people can do the simulation.
If you didn't cap it, how big do you think it would get?
I mean, like, if we didn't cap it, we could have 40 or 50 people, but it wouldn't work, right? Because you actually need to get people on their feet.
Because they're doing demonstrations?
Simulation, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean by simulation?
I assign them. I say, for this, simulation, you are going to play the general counsel at a chocolate company. You are going to be the CEO. You're going to be the CFO, and you're going to be the head of operations. I'm going to give you a hypo, and you're going to get in a room and you're going to discuss it in those roles.
And this is for credit, this institute?
Yep. The seminar for credit. The institute's separate.
The seminar. I'm sorry, the seminar.
Yeah.
Great. So that is more, okay. So you're giving a hypo where they're going to have to, are they essentially arguing the case, or they're having conversation with the opposing counsel? Just to
neither. So neither of those things. That's what's so interesting, because we're not about arguing. We're not about cases. We're about how do you communicate in an in-house setting, and how different that is.
How you communicate to the non-lawyers in-house.
Non-lawyers to your client. Absolutely. That's right. Yep. That's right.
So they're potentially the GC of a Fortune 500 company or some, or mid-sized firm, and there's contract review or something to that degree.
Yep.
They're told to review the contract and share what's going well. What are the risks or not with that? Is that
exactly? And then the other students in the class role play the client, and they'll say, "Well, I want to do this, with the contract, or I don't understand that," and they go back and forth. And then what we do, the class watches the simulation, and then we all debrief together to sort of pull threads on what we've seen.
And is that a full semester?
Yep, that is.
And how many times do you do the simulation as a student for this in the semester?
Probably almost half of the classes. I'd say about eight simulations altogether. They also do a simulated email to the client.
But as a student, are you only doing one simulation per semester, or at each class you're doing a different simulation?
Each class.
So there's enough time for everybody to do a 10-minute simulation or something.
That's right. Yeah. What we do is we do discussion of the material and discussion of the topic of hand. So tonight, for example, I'm teaching confidentiality and privilege in an in-house setting. So we'll discuss key principles of that. Then we'll do simulation on that draws on privilege issue. We've got one hypo tonight that involves the dreaded conversation in the elevator. And then, waiving the privilege unintentionally in the elevator. And then we do a debrief.
Just out of curiosity, don't just answer quickly. We won't go off this track. Do you think if you're typing something to ChatGPT, you're waiving your privilege if that is known that you did that?
Very, very, could be very risky. If for example, if you say, my client came to me to say and is curious about how you incorporate in Delaware, can you give me facts on that? Well, you haven't told them the client, but you've told them a privileged communication that you funneled in. Yeah. So it's going to raise some really interesting questions.
Yeah, no, totally. Okay. So, and how long is this class?
One class is 100 minutes.
100 minutes. Okay. Cause it seems like, that's why you can't have more than 16 people. If that's still not necessarily enough time. And is it, okay. So this is one thing. And what it's called, what is the class called?
It's called the In-House Counsel Experience Seminar.
Fantastic. Now the other thing you do is a mini-MBA. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer the mini-MBA twice. It's offered largely for the evening division in the winter intersession, and then it's offered in the spring after graduation. Mini-MBA is a crash course for people to understand what it's like to be an advisor to a business team. So for example, in the mini-MBA, we go over accounting for lawyers, where we basically spend a half a day talking about, what you would need to know as a lawyer, as it relates to the financial statements, of the organization. We also do a segment on risk and compliance, which again, when I was in law school, nobody taught me risk. No one taught me compliance, right? It wasn't done at the time, but we do it there. We do employment law, as it relates to like carrying out the work, of the business. And so basically we like to think that I think of it as like not so much a teaching focus as kind of planting the seeds with the students for the issues that they're going to want to get up to speed, with as they go through. But you leave, I hope, feeling like I could go inside of an organization and know what they do. And we bring in non-lawyers as well to speak to them about that. And it's been great. It was one of the flagship programs of the Institute from the start.
How many days is it?
It goes 3 days, 3 full days in the spring, and then 3 or 4 days at night during the winter.
Um, so accounting, and then you said, say it again.
Accounting, employment law, risk, compliance, the role of the in-house counsel. We sort of introduce the topic all together. And if there's time, I usually like to hit data, data management, data privacy protection.
Got it. So there's no, it's all which makes sense. It's all related to being a corporate in-house counsel. There's no like, here's what the shoes are like of the CEO of a company who's thinking about the P&L or growth or leadership. It's more about how do you interact with them as well.
That's right. So for example, like we don't do business strategy, we don't cover,
Right,
or marketing, we don't cover. But I do like to bring in guest speakers, right? And I'll frequently will bring in guest speakers that are the clients. So they come in and speak about, what it means to be on the business side. And we actually had last year, not at the mini-MBA, but we have a number of programs throughout the year. We had Jim Tricarico interview Jim Weddle, who's the former lead managing partner at Edward Jones, just for students to see like lawyer
Awesome.
client, what that looks like.
Have you ever had Jordan Kaffner there? Do you know who he is?
Yes. Yeah. Jordan actually is an adjunct now.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Jordan co-teaches technology transactions with me. So
fantastic. And do you record him? The
mini-MBA?
Yeah.
Yes, usually. I don't know.
Classrooms are recorded. I know you have that technology, so maybe.
Yeah. We normally do. I will say, on the question of recording, I feel like there is a risk when you record classes that students are inclined to do the class via Zoom, which I really do not prefer. And so we try to push for in-person.
For sure. And there's how many students you let into this?
That's on cap 40, 50, 60. It can be a big group.
And there's no credit for this. It's just
there's one credit. Yeah, one credit. Yeah.
Got it. And in terms of the in-house counsel simulations, since there's a wait list, how do you decide who you let in and who you don't? What's like sort of the criteria?
It would be reasons you would expect. So we try to make sure that 3Ls that are on there get their opportunity to take it before they graduate. On top of it, it's actually a nice segue and something I wanted to get at. One of the things we did early on is we created an ability for students to formally affiliate with the Tricarico Institute. So they apply and they become affiliates of the Institute. And that has been, for me, again, that was something that may not have been in the like initial job description, but we just made it happen. And that's been great because once they affiliate, they sort of get on my radar actively. And so to answer your previous question, affiliates would have, some degree of preference because they need to take the course to be an affiliate.
When you say an affiliate, can you explain that?
Yeah. So basically, if you're an affiliate, we have a certain set of requirements. And then if you meet those requirements, when you graduate, you can note down that you were an official affiliate of the Tricarico Institute for purposes of your
resume builder.
Exactly. But it really has proven incredibly useful for me because it allows me to do this retail one-on-one mentoring of the students who raise their hand and say, I'm interested in this. And actually, one of the things that's been fascinating about my job is I've gotten to give career advice to students on a regular basis and to network on their behalf. And that's just been a lot of fun.
Well, that's a good segue to a question I thought of was generally what you hear is you don't go in-house right away in the traditional role model. You have to work at a firm first, and then from there you go in-house. Have you seen any shifts in employers looking to hire directly from the school because of the Institute, or what's your thoughts about, what you're saying?
I don't think I can credit the Institute per se, although hopefully over time we will get to a place where we can take credit. What I will say, is that I think students who are affiliated with the Tricarico Institute are ready to go into in-house jobs on day one. Like I think we prepare them well enough, to do that. But let me answer your question about sort of like how it works, if I'm hearing your question correctly, because I get asked this question all the time. What I say on this topic is it remains the case that many in-house legal departments continue to insist upon law firm experience before they will consider hiring. However, I continue to see people graduate New York Law School and their first job is in-house. So if that happens, that means there is a path to it. But the problem is that those hires happen much later than a law firm hire would happen. And so the
Yeah.
person has to be willing to tolerate the risk that comes with that.
Oh, I wonder, because I know New York Law School is a huge nighttime division, if those people who get hired had a different career before law school sometimes. And so that might be one reason why they get hired directly
Yeah.
internally before. So
No,
just
I know, but I have day students. I have day
okay.
students who
Okay.
graduate and they start in-house.
Yeah.
And I will also say, I am not in agreement that that you need it. Like I don't believe it at all. I don't buy the premise. I think you can learn a lot of law firm and then go in-house, and
Yeah.
that's great. Don't believe that you need it.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're a great example. Like you learned on the job. Look, at the end of the day, like, so it's interesting because the simulation based training is the first thing I thought of is like, why can't more classes in law school be similar to that?
Yeah.
Because, the big, argument against law school is you don't learn how to actually practice law. You learn how to, look at cases and look at both sides and argue the case. Iraq, if I can remember my
Yep.
arguing components, and you learn on the basics, but you don't really understand how to practice, and that's why there's so many, especially at big firms, they have their own training programs when somebody starts.
Yep.
And I'm just curious, like what your thoughts are, like with what the institute's doing, and do you see what's happening with AI, what's happening with technology, what's also happening with the cost of education and debt that students are going in?
Sure.
Where do you see things going? Can costs continue to, I guess, as long as the government is backing the loans, the cost will keep going up. But like, it seems like with technology and the way things are changing, and AI, and there's opportunities to reduce the costs and make law school more practical than it is now.
Yeah, I don't want to opine on the cost question just because I haven't done much thinking
Fair
about it. But
enough.
what I
Fair enough.
will say is that I feel like it is our obligation to make it worth it for the students that come here. And I have to say, and obviously I'm biased because I work here, but I think we deliver I think the dean has helped us create a very strong product here where we are delivering a great education to future lawyers and or future business people like you. And I'll give you one example. The dean hired a colleague of mine whose name is Heidi Brown. She came out of Brooklyn Law. She's now here as the associate dean for upper level writing, and she really is all about teaching people to write in a way that they will apply in whatever
Yeah.
job they use. And she is all over the AI stuff in conjunction with me. We haven't gotten to my work on the Innovation Center side, which we can. I was made the co-head of the Innovation Center last summer. Talk a little bit about that. But she is all over this notion of like, if I'm going to teach you writing, I'm going to be thinking about AI and how that relates to it. So there's an example where, again, I don't want to speak about other schools. I don't know necessarily what they're doing, but I feel like we are doing a good job helping our students be ready. And you joke about Iraq. I still think there is great value in the doctrinal training of law, and I think we do it really well, here as well. But so I'll give you an example. When I say we have to get them ready, I have taken it on as my mission to help my students locate and secure externships in the field. Because my belief is that if you go out in the field and actually do something, you're going to be more ready to do it, down the line. And we've been very successful at that. We've sourced, 10, 20, 30, 40 brand new externships. To me, that's part of the education, right? Getting them out there. And by the way, our externship program is accompanied by a seminar. So the externs go and do their thing, and then they meet every other week as a group with our professors to talk about being a successful extern. So I think that is great. I do think, could there be improvement with, what we are spending money on? I'm sure. I don't think the dean would debate you there, but I do think that, again, if they're coming here and they're taking loans out, or if they're spending a lot of their own money to come here, we deserve it to them to get them ready. And I think we are.
Yeah. And by the way, like the conversation is not even, it's not about me or it's not about New York Law School. It's about education as a
Yeah,
whole. And
sure.
it's not just law schools, it's graduates, it's undergraduates, the amount of debt that students leave with and their ability to pay that off. And the whole conversation behind that is really something that will come to a head at some point, because it's the ways to learn are becoming easier and easier, more available. And I think what you're doing actually cannot be replicated as easily, right? Like you're doing something that you need to be in a classroom for, doing the simulation versus just listening to a lecture where, there's apps that are being created and we all like, you sit down, they talk for an hour, you record it, you look at your notes and you study for the test. And like, that's how school is and that's what it is. But like, I like, that's not the purpose of this podcast as a whole, but I would love to constantly have conversations about how to innovate education. So let's segue to that for a second. You are currently, or you used to be, the director of innovation as well?
I'm currently the co-head of the Innovation Center for Law and Technology. I was appointed to that role last summer. And so now I have that second thing to do here, which is separate and apart from the Tricarico Institute, which is focusing on the technology offerings that we have and the programming that we do. So before becoming the co-head, I did found the Tribeca Cybersecurity Summit, which I'm doing a plug for right now because we're going to be hosting it in April and you and your listeners should come to it. So that's where we convene leaders in the cybersecurity law space to speak about trends in cyber, careers in cyber, and advising cybersecurity professionals on the work that they do. I'm very excited about the one we're having in April. That happened before I became the Innovation Center co-head. And now it's just, it's got a life of its own. But I am sort of bringing my technology law experience to bear. I proposed to the dean and the curriculum committee that we create a technology transactions course, which we didn't have at the time. And they very thankfully approved that. And I teach that now with Jordan Camper, another alum and a technology lawyer. And that's a skills course, right? Where we're teaching students what it means to negotiate and draft technology contracts and technology provisions. And that we just did that for the first time last fall. It was our maiden voyage and it was a lot of fun. I think it went well. So yeah, we're going to be, then of course,
so the focus of the Institute is more about being a lawyer for technology, or what innovation you're going to be bringing to the law school from technology side?
I'm so student focused that I for me, it's mostly about what we can do for our students. But I think if there are questions, so I'm a member of the task force that the law school has on artificial intelligence. So I think if there are questions about what we should be doing, I think that they leverage me to answer those questions or to participate in the discussion.
Got it. Every question I ask, there's something else that you're running or doing. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you're currently doing or running personally or professionally that would be interesting for us to know?
I'm not running or anything, but I am, I think, a de facto advisor on public service careers because I came out of that space. And so I don't have any formal role in that area, but I think a lot about municipal governance and city policy. We recently hired, Ben Max to be in a leadership role at the school state Center for State and City, New York State and City Law. And so I think I kind of play that role as well. I'm also the faculty advisor to the Latino Law Students Association, Privacy Law Students Association, and the Employment and Labor Law Students Association. So get to wear those hats as well.
When I hear you say all these great things, which I love it's the saying, gives somebody who's busy something to do and they'll get it done. And like the people who are the busiest are the ones who you can keep giving them more and more things because they figured out a way. They set limits because the busier you are, you can't procrastinate forever. You got to get it, perfect is the enemy of good. To me, the worst thing in the world is having all this time and not knowing what to do with it. And I can relate to that. And I was curious if you feel that way at all as well.
Oh yeah. I loathe boredom. And I like having variety in my day. To give you two examples, I was appointed to the curriculum committee at the school. So that's been a lot of fun because I'm getting a much wider view of sort of what it is that we teach and how we do that. So that's been really fun. And also in the last 4 or 5 years, I've joined, the board of directors of a couple of different organizations. I'm on the board of Hudson River Park Trust, which runs our beautiful park along the Hudson here, and actually runs by the law school in part. I'm on the board of Start Small, Think Big, which is an organization that does great work for small businesses. And I'm on the board of the Judge Alexander Williams Center for Law, Ethics, and Democracy at the University of Maryland, which is founded by the judge I used to clerk for. So yeah, to your point there, does it feel a little bit busy when you get done with the day and you got the board meeting at night? Yes, but it is fun. And yeah, I completely agree with you. If you have a day that's too open, it's not fun. I will say I have ambitions to do some more writing, and I feel like my writing has taken a hit from the various things that are going on, because I feel like the time to devote to just like typing and the things you want to write, not quite there, but someday.
One of the things that I've heard over the past, I think this was from Randy Zuckerberg's, which was, she wrote a book actually, was there's 5 things that you can do, but you can only do 3 of them at the same time, like family, finance, friends, fitness, it's personal, focus. And I really resonate with that. I had a brain fart because I couldn't remember Mark Zuckerberg's name. So Randy Zuckerberg is Mark Zuckerberg's sister.
Okay, got it.
And she wrote a book, which was great. And I saw her speak. And like, I always feel that way when I'm working on something else is dropping, and writing is the one thing that's there. But so let me ask you this component of it, because we talked about leadership before. A lot of what we focus on, both for leaders and at Lawline, is work-life balance. And the flip side of being so busy is generally there's some sort of stress. We all deal with stress in some form. And if you can indulge me a little bit, because you are a human and like, it's not just about all the accomplishments, where are you stressed right now as it relates to life or work, or like, how do you deal with it?
It's a great question. I mean, I think so. My wife and I have 3 kids.
Enough said.
Yeah. What more do I need to say other than that? And they are 8, 6, and 6. And I think that, if you are a parent who cares, and hopefully most parents do, then the parenting exercise comes with stress, because if you care, there's a lot to take care of. If you don't care, then it's not that stressful whatsoever. And I think that I think you said the word balance, and I think that talk about I should listen to podcasts that can teach me this, but finding that balance is just so critical. And really where I've come out for me, and I don't want to judge anyone else who does it differently, because everyone has to do their own thing. But for me, I'm a better parent when I'm fulfilled at work. When I'm doing stuff at work that makes me feel fulfilled, I'm a better parent, for my children. And so when I miss them because I'm doing something at work, I know that I'll be, better. Tonight's a good example. I teach the seminar at night, so I usually miss bedtime on Mondays. And there's that little bit of guilt that comes with it. It's like, oh, you're not there for bedtime, you're going to ruin them forever. And then you see them the next morning and nothing's been ruined and they're perfectly fine. And you've taught and had a good experience doing that. So, yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say, I don't know if it's responsive to your point, but I do think this a lot. I think that you can always control your overall time working more than you realize, right? So what do I mean by this? When I was general counsel, I felt so busy, I felt like an endless stream of stuff. But I made a rule pretty early on. My daughter had just been born before I started. I made a rule pretty early on. Is like, I'm going to leave by 6 o'clock every day. That's it. I'm going to leave by 6 o'clock every day. And the people who work for me would attest to the fact that, but for emergencies, it's always come up. I would leave at 6 o'clock every day. And if I had to work at night, I would work at night. But often I wouldn't have to work at night. Meaning, like, if you're very productive, you go home and you think to yourself, I kind of want to watch a hockey game today. I'm gonna watch the hockey game. It's okay. Everything will be okay. And the reason I say that is because I think sometimes when you see people that are just out of control busy, it's that they're not actually proactively constraining the things that they're doing. Some people will say to me like, I haven't worked out in 6 weeks. I've been so busy. And you're like, really? You haven't had time to work out in 6 weeks? How did that happen? So
Well, a couple of things. One, and then the follow-up to this, I just binge watched 4 shows about.
there you go. Right.
But I could tell you, as a father of twins as well, and I have 3 kids. My twins are older, so they're 16, 16, and then I have 11-year-old. The issue is not about your kids, that's where you feel the guilt about. It's about your wife being alone with the 3 kids and putting them all to bed. Like that's the more practical component. But obviously, when you have a good partnership, and everybody supports each other, that's important. I did want to share something because you're at the right stage that was really transformational for my family. So when our twins were 8, so they're 5 years older, and I think that's maybe he was like 2. It was like in between birthdays, 2 or 3, and they were 8. It was chaos at our house, and we were like we were really struggling. We found this book by Patrick Lencioni, who also wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The book that we book it's called 3 Questions for the Frantic Family.
Great.
He also, I think he has 4 kids. And was so good about that book, it takes all the things that you learn as a leader, core values, mission, strategy, goals, and it takes that and it helps you apply it to your family.
Right.
Our kids were old enough and at that time they weren't being respectful, they weren't listening, they weren't going to bed on time. Bedtime was the hardest for us. And so our 8-year-olds were old enough where we sat down and working together, we all like shared our core values and things like that. And from that, we created a mission statement.
Fascinating.
And the last line of the mission statement actually changed our lives.
Amazing.
Sorry, I don't mean to turn this into a rant, but I just want to share to give you insight. And the last line is a passion that Kelly and I have had, is we wanted to live our life through travel. When we wrote that, we didn't know if that meant one big trip a year, because we used to travel a lot before the kids were born.
Like I saw a post you recently posted where you were somewhere.
I lived in Barcelona for 2 years.
Okay, there you go.
I just regurgitate the same content, but I do it because I'm actually, to your point, I'm publishing a second book. I had my first book I published in 2019 called The Fast Forward Mindset, and that was a dream come true for me. I love reading books, and that's gonna be my segue to ask you about your book. The second book, it's actually about personal freedom and work-life balance, because just to give you a sense, in 2015, I set the mission of Lawline to focus around personal freedom, which meant we not only for lawyers to continuing CLE courses, but for our internal employees, we wanted to set them up. And it's gone as far, just to show you how authentic we are to our mission. This year, we just launched rotating 4-day work weeks. So every other Friday, half the company has off. And we want to break the mold of the concept, thinking you need to work 80 hours a week or 50 hours, I guess now even 40 hours a week to get the job done. And we believe technology will help us get there. And, I don't know if your kids have asked you this question yet, but it's the question we all thought of when we were kids. Why does the weekend have to be 2 days and 5 days? I was like, well, back in the Industrial Revolution, you need to go to the factories. But I don't know if that's the case anymore. So thank you for listening to that. I hope that was good. My segue to you is like, is there any books that have been transformational? And we're just in case we have a few more minutes and I'll let you go. Any books that have been transformational in your life?
Sure. I mean, so the in-house counsel revolution, by Ben Heineman was transformational for me because it framed this notion of like what it means to be a good in-house lawyer in the way that he sketched it out. And he also grounds his book in this notion that lawyers should do more than apply the law, but they should also try to have the organization do the right thing. Which for me, I used to have a great client by the name of Jeff Brown, who is the former CISO of the city of New York. And he had just on his lips always like, what's the right thing? What's the right thing for us to be doing? And I would love that framing. I think Mayor Bloomberg, who I didn't know personally when he was the mayor, obviously Dean Crowell did, I feel like he also had that approach, like, what's the right thing we should be doing here, So that book was very transformational in that regard. But one thing I will say is that I really do recommend to burgeoning lawyers to read non-legal books, because there is so much to be learned, from non-legal books. I read a book last year called The Splendid and the Vile, which was about the Blitz in London. And it was riveting, obviously, what the Brits and Churchill and all them went through when their bombs falling on their head for a year. And it was brilliantly written, but you learn so much about leadership under pressure, decision making, how to respond to crisis in different ways. So I feel like that's a book where I feel like it was transformative for me, even though it had nothing to do with the law, if that makes sense. And so I feel like I recommend,
I love that. I wasn't even thinking about legal books. That's great that you were able to have one. I love that, The Splendid and The Vile. I've never heard that one before.
It's fantastic. The name of the author is slipping my mind, but it was true page turner. I'm trying to think of others in recent times. I mean, those are the big ones. I'm started now the ethics of artificial intelligence by a professor who I've gotten to know at my alma mater, Yale, which has been great. And so I think in that regard,
podcasts.
I don't listen to many podcasts. I do recommend, there's an individual by the name of Casey Newton who writes a newsletter called Platformer. For those of us in the AI space, I find his newsletters to be great. He, is out there sort of testing the variety of tech and then issues the newsletter. The Odd Lots podcast on Bloomberg is great. I get their newsletter as well. That's kind of macroeconomics, which I feel like you can never hurt to know. I highly for those interested in city government, there is a blog called newsletter First Read from City and State, which you can sign up on their website. And I love getting that every morning because it just tells you what's the mayor up to, what's the governor up to, what's the national folks up to. It's just a real good digest to start the day. I'm not great about podcasts. I probably could up my podcast game, honestly, if you have any recommendation. Other than yours.
We can all upgrade everything. And that's where I struggle myself. There's not enough time in the day to figure out how to learn enough. And in a way, that's why I love hosting a podcast, because it forced me at least for a half hour to learn about you.
I would imagine you must be learning so much. Yeah.
No, it's great. And like, even this, my goal is to do 100 podcasts this year. Like I want to do 1 million. Like I want to do a podcast. Like it's just, to me, talking to somebody and learning who they are is the best. And I'll leave. There was a question that I had that I just lost to end you on, but it is okay. So we had talked about books. We talked about podcasts. Oh, the question I want to ask you to end on is, what do you do to keep up with what all the innovations with what's happening with AI? There's a guy that I follow, and I actually met with him at New York Law School. There was a legal tech summit, Connor Grennans. I don't know if you know him. He's a dean at NYU. He is unbelievable in terms of like all the changes and updates, and he posts them all on LinkedIn. He just hit 100,000 followers. But like whenever I see the updates with everything going on, I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing, but overwhelmed. Are you trying to keep up with all the changes? Are you experimenting yourself?
I definitely experiment myself. Yeah, I was working on Claude over the weekend, and kind of a back and forth with Claude over some interesting. I had some sort of news curiosity and sort of funneling it through. So I definitely experiment myself. I think that I'm not that proactive about keeping up with each thing, but I will say that whether it's LinkedIn, Blue Sky, I'm big on the Bloomberg News app. I find a lot of stuff pops there that I find to be of interest. And like a combination of sources, I feel like it gets me to, and you know what it does? It gets me to a point where at least I get alerted. I'll give you an example. That Odd Lots podcast I mentioned, Joe Wiesenthal and Tracy Alloway at Bloomberg, I feel like they were 3 days ahead of the DeepSeek news. At least like they were just talking about DeepSeek this and this and that. And I was like, oh, this is super interesting. And then 3 days later, like the world exploded. So, but I would appreciate that recommendations from you. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. And if there are good people who are experimenting with stuff, I'd love to check that out.
Awesome. The last question is, how can Lawline help? How can I help with what you're doing at New York Law School, with any areas that you think that we could, the courses that we have, the faculty have, the leadership understandings that we have, we have a deep connection to New York Law School. Just figured I'd ask you on air, what can we do to help you guys more?
I will have so many asks of you. I mean, I think on the leadership front, I'm very interested in that. I think on if you have, I mean, we are building out the tech curriculum, right? So if you have thought leaders in that space, I feel like I cover cyber myself, but I am pushing data privacy extremely hard, and so thinking about what more we could be teaching on the privacy side. I mean, what I would say to you, data law in general is where I think we're headed. And if you have, let me give you one example, David. I don't really do much in the sort of data business space. Like we don't teach that. That's an interesting topic, right? Like, rather than just protection and privacy, well, what are the data businesses? Data is a huge business now. What does that look like from a legal perspective?
Today, Brian Chase, the podcast Today, I highly, 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 highly recommend you watch it when you have a chance.
Great.
He has 12 programs on Lawline right now. By the way, if you don't have a subscription, I'll make sure you have one. We'll talk after. They're all on data. The most recent course that he did was, one is how all your devices are tracking you and how that's used in court.
Yep.
The second one was how Gen AI is really messing up what evidence looks like in court, because you can actually make anything fall. You don't know what's real or not anymore, and it's all data. And finally, for me, one of my things that I would love to do someday is I would love to be an adjunct professor at New York Law School. How do I figure out if I go down that path? Who do I
come to me? You come to me and we talk about it. What do you want to teach and when you can teach?
It's on my list, man. Like I think I love connecting, and I love connecting in a small way, and teaching is the best form of learning.
Yeah. So, we will make it happen. But let me leave you with one final thought for your listeners.
Yeah. I want to be busier.
One suggestion exactly I make to my students is I say to them every single day, at the start of the day, I want you to ask yourself who you can help that day. And at the end of the day, I want you to ask yourself, who did I help today? Or how many people did I help today? And I feel like, I don't know where I learned that. I can't remember who taught me that, but I feel like it's the most important thing you can do for career success, is support the people in your network and help them. So that's just my last sort of parting suggestion. Just think through, are there ways I can help other people? Because we all spend so much time worrying about ourselves, and that's totally natural. But there are people out there who really could use your help, and so just getting out there and doing that and giving of yourself, it's really, I think something that we all should do more of.
I agree. I could do a better job of that myself. I'll add one thing to add on top to build on that is without wanting anything in return.
Exactly. Totally.
Look, you can have your own motivations. I want to help because I get energy from helping. That's great. But without, it's not tit for tat. I appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation. It's going to be of real value, especially when we get the transcript and you can find clips that you want to use for New York Law School. I hope the dean will watch it. And he will.
I'm sure he will.
But I will, and I look forward to. I'll find a time to come to New York Law School and connect with you in person and figure out how Lawline can help without wanting anything in return.
That sounds great. No, it's a pleasure being on. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye now.